My name is Howard Wright, and I'm really recording this for Geniusiscommon. Um, I've really been inspired in looking at the whole concept of a common genius, and it fascinates me in looking at it. I don't know if I can contribute a lot to it, uh, but I can tell you what I believe my common genius is, and that is to tell a story. I a little bit uncomfortable with talking about genius because I think that the only genius that I may have is to be able to not just tell a story, but everybody's story. Um, and my juncture into this journey started all the way back in 1966. 1 year prior to that, a man by the name of Malcolm X was assassinated in the Audubon Ballroom on February 21st. I had heard a lot about this man prior to that, but I never went to see him. I saw him on TV, I saw him speak in a couple of places, but I never really got to hear him because when, for instance, he was on TV, they'd cut off the TV and say, "Don't listen to that man. That man is dangerous and he's going to get you in a lot of trouble if you listen to him." So Malcolm's story was pretty much filtered for me through other people's eyes. And as a result of that, um, his story was being told to me in a manner in which I couldn't possibly get a good understanding of what he's saying. After his assassination, which flashed across the TV, Malcolm X assassinated, there wasn't a lot of sorrow in my household over his death, and it was almost as if it was a relief. And so nobody really spoke of it much. When I went to South Carolina, I was sent down there because I was considered a problem child in Brooklyn, New York, where I lived, to live with my grandmother. One of the most curious things happened. Another friend of mine, a genius of himself, his name is Lee Andrew Pippins. It was 1 year my junior, but he was a genius. He read Franz Fanon and everybody else. Before hearing Pippin, I didn't know that we were the wretched of the earth. Before hearing Pippin, I didn't know that we had black skins but wore white masks. I didn't know all of this stuff about neo-colonialism and the geopolitical nature of the politics that helped to shape the image of Africa. Well, mm, Pippin took me to my music teacher at that time, who was trying to form a student organization under the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, SNCC, which was the student version called the Student Pride Educational Club. We were sort of associated with it. Um, and they brought me in there, and he said, "I want you to listen to Malcolm X." I don't want to hear Malcolm X. I don't. I already know about this guy. He's not a good dude. And he said, "Well, why don't you let me play him for you for a minute and we see." And the album that they played to me was called "The Ballad or the Bullet." It was done in April 1964, just before his trip to Mecca. And As I listened to him, the first words I remember out of Malcolm's mouth was brothers and sisters, and I see we have some enemies. And then I laughed and I said, here's a guy that's, saying something that you don't normally hear a speaker say. But as I got more relaxed in listening to him, I was instantly transformed. When I heard this man, I listened to the simple truth that he told, and I said, my God, they were lying to me. This is no monster. This is a great man trying to sincerely get out a message to tell his story. One of the things I remember Malcolm said as I began to immerse myself into the language of Malcolm, his messages, his books, and everything else I could on him. One of the things he said was history was best suited to reward or research. I said, gee, that's profound. Is it true? So I hearkened to his words, and from the time I was 16 years old until now, and by the way, I'll be 67 this year, I dedicated myself to understanding what we call griotology. We don't call it history because history in itself is not only misogynistic, but it's also very racist and insane. Because when you say history, you're talking from a male perspective, and you're saying his, and you're also saying his story. And in most of the cases, when you talk about history, we're talking about Western civilization or Western culture through the eyes of Western thought, and it's very narrow. So her history, my history, Asian history, Latino history, everybody else's people who are not colored under that whole idea of white supremacy story is sort of obliterated, and we absorb ourselves in his story. So we invented a word, Sankofa Restoration Project, which we call Malcolm's baby, called griotology. And with griotology, it only means that it is trying to devoid yourself of all political or religious or cultural and all other aspects that would immerse itself in a nationalistic thought. Just devoid yourself of it so that you can be able to look through the filter of everybody's story. Okay, his story is all right, but her story's all right, and my story's all right, and their story's all right. And we try to put it together. It's hard because you can't really filter out all your biases and all the things you've grown up with that brings into your culture. And you really don't want to, but you want to acknowledge that it's a prejudice and a bias in yourself, and that helps to filter into how do you develop the whole idea of griotology. And this is what we attempt to do as we begin to tell all of these different stories in the manner that we do. One of the projects that we have, and it's not the largest project, but it's one of the projects that we have, is Sankofa Restoration Project, is to restore the stories or the griotology of all the black families in America, from the time that they were taken from their tribes to the time that they came to America to the present moment. At first, everybody says to me that, it's like Don Quixote. You're just sticking lances into windmills. You just can't do that. We don't have names that we can trace like white folks. We don't have a history that was preserved like white folks. We don't have any of these things. How can you possibly trace the history of all of these people? Well, it was difficult. It took us about 15 years before we finally stumbled on methods that helped us to have alternative ways of being able to develop that history. And so we did that, and we used our techniques, and I won't go into all of it because it's too long and too belaboring to literally do it in one session, but what we've managed to accomplish in the last 35, 40 years is exactly what we set out to. And we have developed techniques and ways that took it out the box, but we certainly uniquely were able to get our stories together and tell them from Africa to America. And we're in the verge of putting out a 64-volume books on the black families just in South Carolina alone, and every state is going to get an equivalent volume until we have an encyclopedia that will let people just need to know who their grandfather was. And if you can tell who your grandfather was, you can just go to the book and trace your family all the way back to its very beginnings and roots. And that's something that we're very proud of accomplishment. And hopefully we would have been able to give some contribution to the World Society in doing this. Like I said, the roots of all this is Malcolm X, and we call it Malcolm X's baby. We don't even try to claim what it is because we know that he was the source of our beginning. And so we have several other projects. We have a 3-volume set on Malcolm coming out this year, beginning on his birthday. This is 2017. Hopefully the first volume, if it's not delayed, will come out on his birthday, May 19th. We have another book that's going to come out approximately in November, which is a history of the student movement in America of the 60s and 70s and how it transpired. And we're using the lives of students from a school called the State University of Albany in New York to use as a microcosm of the entire nation and how they told the story of the nation. I went to that school myself. I was there, I was a witness, and we produced the first Black Studies program in America as student protest, and going and forward. We think it's just a marvelous, fabulous story that's going to be told. And finally, one of the other things that we're going to try to do is bring back the penny press. We're going to go on places like You Go Fund It, and we're going to ask people to donate money to not just the books that we're doing, but also the other books that we have translated into English, that we have literally brought back from the past that people haven't seen for 100, 200 years, but you see references in it from other people's works. And when we start training people and we start getting that together, we are hoping to produce about 200 books a year to bring back a literacy in terms of our culture. Now, why we call it the penny press is because the money that people are putting in is going to be a credit towards some of the books, or all the books that we're going to publish, penny for penny. And where we have books that are so rare that you can only buy them right now at about $2,000 or $4,000, we are going to try to get our project funded so that no book will cost over $10, and hopefully most of them will only cost $5. So we'll be bringing back that penny press. So that's a great investment for people in the way that they will, if you donate $1,000, you'll have $1,000 worth of books at $5 and $10, which is going to be a huge library for you. And hopefully, if we can get enough people to go fund this thing, we will be able to put, not only throughout the country but around the world, we will be able to rebuild the cultural empire that speaks of the African heritage, not just in America but abroad. And so, like I said, I'm not much of a genius, but I do love to study other people's genius, and we love to tell other people's geniuses' story. So that's what we have in common. And I'd like to thank you for listening to this story. Again, my name is Wright. I'm the executive director of the Sankofa Restoration Project. And of course, the father of our project is Malcolm X, and we'd like to thank him for the vision that he's given us over the year. And hopefully, in telling his story, everybody will understand all the stories that are being told. And I'd like to thank you very much for listening.